Batman wasn't just a blockbuster, it was a production nightmare that nearly destroyed Tim Burton's sanity. From 50,000 angry protest letters to stolen film reels, from a director who didn't know his own ending to an actor who earned more money than the entire production budget, Tim Burton's 1989 film changed cinema forever, while barely surviving its own chaotic creation. Here are 15 unknown facts about Batman. Fact 1. When Warner Brothers announced that Michael Keaton had been cast as Batman, comic book fans absolutely lost their minds. This wasn't just online complaining, we're talking about actual physical letters being written, stamped, and mailed to Warner Brothers offices. In total, approximately 50,000 protest letters arrived demanding Keaton be replaced. The backlash was so severe that even Batman co-creator Bob Kane, screenwriter Sam Hamm, and producer Michael Uslan openly questioned whether Keaton was the right choice. Fans knew Keaton primarily as a comedic actor from films like Mr. Mom and Beetlejuice. The idea of this guy playing the Dark Knight seemed absolutely ridiculous to anyone familiar with the source material. Warner Brothers executives were genuinely terrified that they'd made a catastrophic mistake that would doom the entire production. To combat the overwhelmingly negative publicity, they made an emergency decision. They quickly assembled a 90-second theatrical trailer and showed it at a theater in Westwood, Los Angeles to test audience reaction. The trailer received a standing ovation. That audience response was so enthusiastic that bootleg copies of the trailer became massively popular at comic book conventions before the film's release. The studio breathed a collective sigh of relief. Fact 2. Joker. Jack Nicholson's deal for Batman remains one of the most legendary contracts in Hollywood history. At the time, Nicholson's standard fee was $10 million per film, but for Batman, he agreed to take only $6 million up front. In exchange for that $4 million pay, Nicholson negotiated something unprecedented: a percentage of the film's total box office gross, plus a cut of all merchandising revenue, plus earnings from future sequels even if he didn't appear in them. The studio agreed because they desperately needed Nicholson's star power to give the risky project credibility. The film became a massive phenomenon, earning over $400 million worldwide and generating an absolute merchandising empire. Nicholson's deal included an escalator clause where his percentage increased as the movie made more money, starting at 15% and climbing to 20%. Between box office, merchandise sales, home video, and his cut from Batman Returns and Batman Forever, despite not appearing in them, Nicholson reportedly earned between $60 and $90 million total. That's approximately $164,000 per word for the 585 words he spoke in the film. Meanwhile, Michael Keaton earned only $6 million flat for actually playing Batman. Nicholson even received top billing. His name appears before Keaton's in all the credits. Fact 3. The script was being rewritten constantly throughout production, which meant Burton was essentially making up huge portions of the movie as he went along. This created one particularly embarrassing moment during filming of the cathedral climax. Jack Nicholson was climbing the cathedral stairs with Kim Basinger when he stopped mid-scene and asked Burton a very reasonable question: "Why am I walking up all these stairs? Where am I going?" Burton's response was, "We'll talk about it when you get to the top." When they reached the top, Burton had to confess the truth. He genuinely didn't know. He had no idea how the scene or the entire movie would end. The original plan was even more problematic. In an earlier version of the climax, the Joker was supposed to kill Vicky Vale, sending Batman into a vengeful fury. Producer John Peters completely reworked this ending without even telling Burton. Peters commissioned production designer Anton Furst to create a massive 38-foot model of the cathedral, which cost $100,000 when the film was already severely over budget. Burton hated the idea, but had to figure out some kind of ending on the fly, while Nicholson and Basinger stood there waiting for direction. Fact 4. Sean Young was Tim Burton's original choice to play Vicky Vale. Fresh from success in Blade Runner, Wall Street, and Dune, Young seemed perfect for the role. She was in London for 4 weeks doing read-throughs and rehearsals when disaster struck. An early version of the script included an equestrian scene where Vicky would be shown horseback riding, setting up a later action sequence. Young was practicing her horse riding skills at the location where they planned to film Wayne Manor when she was thrown from the horse and fractured her arm. With cameras set to roll in exactly 1 week, producer John Peters suggested replacing Young with Kim Basinger. Burton immediately agreed. Young later suggested bitterly that they could have shot around her injury, but Peters wanted Basinger and saw an opportunity to make the switch. The cruelest irony, the horseback riding scene Young was practicing for when she got injured was completely deleted from the final film. It never appeared at all. The scene showed Bruce and Vicky riding horses together on their first date, with Bruce making jokes about constantly falling off horses. That entire sequence and the action payoff it was building toward got cut during editing. Young's career never fully recovered from missing this massive opportunity. Fact 5. Filming was conducted under intense secrecy because Warner Brothers was terrified that leaked images would fuel even more negative publicity about Keaton's casting. Security was extremely tight around Pinewood Studios. The unit publicist was offered £10,000 for the first pictures of Nicholson in full Joker makeup and refused the bribe. Despite these precautions, something went catastrophically wrong mid-production. 2 entire reels of footage, representing approximately 20 minutes of completed scenes, were stolen from the set. This wasn't a case of lost film or misplaced canisters. Someone deliberately stole finished footage, presumably to sell it or leak it publicly. The police were immediately called in to investigate the theft. The production had to scramble to figure out which scenes had been stolen and how to work around the missing sequences. This forced the crew to improvise solutions and reshoot material they'd already completed, adding even more stress to an already troubled production. Burton later described the entire Batman filming experience as torture and the worst period of my life, partly due to constant problems like this theft. The stolen footage has apparently never surfaced publicly, and the identity of the thief was never discovered. If you want more videos like this, subscribe, like, and comment what movie you want us to cover next. Fact 6. Despite all the production problems, script rewrites, budget overruns, stolen footage, and constant behind-the-scenes chaos, Batman was actually filmed in an astonishingly short period of time. Principal photography lasted only 12 weeks total, less than 3 months. For a film of this scale and ambition, that's an incredibly compressed shooting schedule. Most major blockbusters require 4 to 6 months of principal photography. The 12-week schedule meant extremely long days with enormous pressure on everyone involved. Burton wasn't greenlit to direct until after the first weekend box office numbers came in for Beetlejuice. Once that film proved successful in March 1988, Warner Brothers officially hired Burton and rushed Batman into production by October 1988. They wrapped filming in January 1989 and had the movie in theaters by June 1989. An absolutely brutal timeline for a film this complex. The tight schedule contributed significantly to Burton's miserable experience making the film. Between the 12-week shoot, the budget escalating from $30 million to $48 million, and the constant script problems, it's remarkable the film turned out as well as it did. Fact 7. Jack Nicholson had incredibly specific contractual requirements for his participation. One of the most unusual stipulations was his off-the-clock agreement, which specified exact hours he was entitled to have off each day. Nicholson made it absolutely clear from day one that he was not a morning person and would not be showing up to set before 10 a.m. under any circumstances. Michael Keaton would arrive at Pinewood Studios early in the morning to begin his lengthy process of getting into the Batman suit. Meanwhile, Nicholson would roll in around 10 a.m., casually greet everyone, briefly chat about sports, then immediately sit down in the makeup chair and fall completely asleep. The makeup artists would spend the next 2 hours applying his elaborate Joker prosthetics while Nicholson napped. 1 hour was required to remove the makeup at the end of each day. Nicholson originally demanded to have all his scenes shot in a 3-week block, but the schedule ended up extending to 106 days of work. He maintained his late arrival policy throughout the entire production. Nobody complained because Warner Brothers knew Nicholson's star power was essential to the film's credibility, and they'd given him enormous leverage in negotiations. Fact 8. Tim Burton was not a comic book fan whatsoever when he was hired to direct Batman. In fact, by his own admission, he'd only loved one comic book in his entire life, Alan Moore and Brian Bolland's The Killing Joke. That was it. Burton had no connection to Batman comics, no childhood nostalgia for the character, and no particular enthusiasm for superheroes. Warner Brothers wanted Burton specifically because of his visual style and dark sensibility demonstrated in Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Beetlejuice, not because he understood Batman. Burton initially didn't want the job and was unsatisfied with Tom Mankiewicz's campy screenplay. He convinced his then-girlfriend Julie Hickson to write a new 30-page treatment that completely changed the tone. Warner Brothers approved that treatment, which led to Sam Hamm writing a much darker screenplay influenced by Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns and Burton's beloved Killing Joke. Even then, Burton still wasn't officially hired. He was in limbo waiting to see if Beetlejuice would succeed. Warner Brothers literally waited for Beetlejuice's first weekend box office numbers before officially offering Burton the Batman job. Years later, Burton admitted he found the finished Batman film boring overall, despite enjoying certain elements of it. Fact 9.
I'm Batman.
One of the most iconic lines in cinema history, "I'm Batman," it wasn't in the original script at all. Michael Keaton improvised it completely on his own. The screenplay originally had Batman say, "I am the Knight," during that confrontation scene. Keaton felt the scripted line didn't work and came up with the simpler, more direct, "I'm Batman," instead. Tim Burton immediately recognized it was perfect and kept it in the film. That improvised line became so iconic that it was later incorporated into Batman, the animated series, as part of Batman's even more famous declaration, "I am vengeance, I am the Knight, I am Batman." The animated series drew heavy inspiration from Burton's film, including using Danny Elfman's musical theme. Keaton also came up with other character choices that defined his portrayal. He decided to perform Batman's voice at a significantly lower register than his normal Bruce Wayne voice, creating a vocal distinction between the two personas. This became a hallmark technique that Christian Bale later adopted. Keaton also suggested having Bruce Wayne hang upside down like a bat, wanting to emphasize the psychological trauma and mental illness aspects of someone who dresses up as a bat to fight crime. Fact 10. Batman began with an approved production budget of $30 million, which was already substantial for 1988. By the time filming wrapped, that budget had escalated to $48 million, a nearly 60% increase. The budget kept climbing for multiple reasons. The massive Gotham City set was built across 18 sound stages at Pinewood Studios, covering 95 acres. Producer John Peters commissioned expensive set pieces without Burton's approval, including that $100,000 cathedral model. The 1988 Writers Guild of America strike forced original screenwriter Sam Hamm to leave, requiring Warner Brothers to hire Warren Scarron, Jonathan Gems, and Charles McKeown for expensive rewrites during filming. Jack Nicholson's elaborate prosthetic makeup took 2 hours to apply and 1 hour to remove daily, adding significant time and expense. The stolen film reels forced reshoots of already completed scenes. The film's eventual worldwide gross of over $400 million made the budget overruns seem insignificant in retrospect, but during production, Warner Brothers executives were increasingly nervous about whether this massively expensive gamble on an untested director, a controversial lead actor, and a dark superhero movie would pay off at all. Fact 11. Warner Brothers executives were nervous about every aspect of Batman's production, including the musical direction. The studio wanted a safe, traditional orchestral score. Tim Burton had other ideas. He was a massive fan of Prince and wanted the musician involved somehow. During filming of the parade sequence and the museum rampage scene, Burton blasted Prince songs constantly on set. This wasn't just for atmosphere. Burton was deliberately annoying the Warner Brothers executives who visited the set, essentially trolling them with his musical choices. Eventually, Burton got his way, and Prince was hired to write original songs for the film. Prince created an entire album inspired by and featured in the movie, including tracks like Bat Dance and Party Man. The Prince songs appeared during key Joker scenes, giving those sequences a specific 1980s pop culture energy that contrasted sharply with Danny Elfman's dark orchestral score. Elfman himself was initially worried about composing for Batman because he'd never worked on a production this large in budget and scale. Burton gave Elfman a copy of The Dark Knight Returns for inspiration. The combination of Elfman's gothic score and Prince's pop songs created Batman's unique sonic identity that perfectly captured Burton's weird tonal balance. Fact 12.
Phone book.
Yes, sir.
Warner Brothers desperately wanted Jack Nicholson to play the Joker, but Nicholson was initially hesitant about committing to a comic book movie. The studio knew they needed leverage to pressure Nicholson into accepting. They approached Robin Williams and offered him the Joker role, making sure Nicholson found out about it. This was a deliberate negotiating tactic, using Williams as bait to make Nicholson jealous and push him to accept. The strategy worked. Nicholson agreed to play the Joker, but he never forgot being manipulated. Years later, when Joel Schumacher was casting Batman Forever, Warner Brothers again approached Williams to play the Riddler. Once again, they used Williams' name to pressure their actual first choice, Jim Carrey, into accepting. This time, Williams was genuinely furious. He publicly called out Warner Brothers for using him as a bargaining chip twice without any intention of actually casting him. Williams felt deeply disrespected and cheated by the studio's tactics. He held a grudge against Warner Brothers for years afterward. Producer John Peters and Batman co-creator Bob Kane had actually wanted Nicholson since 1980, approaching him as far back as 1986 during filming of The Witches of Eastwick. Fact 13. There's a persistent Hollywood legend that Willem Dafoe was considered to play the Joker in Batman. Dafoe himself has confirmed he had early discussions about the film, but here's what most people don't know. Dafoe was actually being considered for Batman, not the Joker. Director Tim Burton was originally interested in casting a complete unknown actor as Batman before studio pressure forced him to consider bigger names. Willem Dafoe was in those very early conversations as a potential Dark Knight. Reports falsely claimed for years that Dafoe had been offered the Joker role and turned it down. Dafoe later clarified that any discussions about Joker came much later in his career. The confusion has persisted for decades. Meanwhile, the list of actors considered for Batman was enormous. Mel Gibson, Pierce Brosnan, Kevin Costner, Charlie Sheen, Tom Selleck, Bill Murray, Harrison Ford, Dennis Quaid, Alec Baldwin, and many others. Mel Gibson was actually the first choice and turned it down because he was committed to Lethal Weapon 2. Pierce Brosnan met with Burton but turned down the role, later explaining during a Reddit AMA that he couldn't take seriously any man who wears his underpants outside his pants. Fact 14. Michael Keaton's iconic Batman costume had one very non-Batman element that drove Tim Burton absolutely crazy. The boots were modified Nike Air Trainer shoes. Warner Brothers had already struck a deal with Nike before production began, and the studio insisted Nike footwear be incorporated into the Batsuit. Keaton reportedly found the Nike boots very comfortable to wear during the grueling 12-week shoot, which was important given how restrictive and uncomfortable the rest of the costume was. But Burton was irritated because the Nike boots didn't match the gothic aesthetic he was creating for the rest of the film. They looked too modern and sporty for his dark, timeless Gotham City. Burton fought against using them but didn't have enough leverage to override Warner Bros. Corporate sponsorship deal. Product placement money was helping offset the film's escalating budget. The Nike boots are visible in several shots if you look closely, though most audiences never noticed them. This wasn't the only corporate tie-in. The entire marketing campaign for Batman was unprecedented, with the Bat logo appearing on everything from t-shirts to breakfast cereal. The merchandising blitz became a template that all future blockbusters would follow. Fact 15. Adam West had played Batman in the beloved 1960s television series that introduced an entire generation to the character. When Tim Burton's movie was announced, West genuinely hoped he'd be asked to reprise the role one final time. Despite being in his 60s by 1989, West still felt he could play Batman, and desperately wanted the opportunity. He wasn't even contacted about the possibility. When West heard that Michael Keaton, a comedic actor primarily known for Mr. Mom and Beetlejuice, had been cast instead, he was absolutely devastated. In a 1989 episode of the television show A Current Affair, West was asked how he felt about Keaton's casting. West admitted that he cried for an hour after hearing the news. The rejection hurt him deeply because he'd defined the character for millions of people and felt completely dismissed. To his credit, West eventually came to accept and even appreciate Keaton's darker interpretation. Burton clearly wanted to create something drastically different from West's campy version, which was part of why the director deliberately avoided anything connected to the 1960s series. West passed away in 2017, but he spent his final years as a beloved elder statesman of Batman actors, respected by all who came after him. Utero. From protest letters to stolen reels, Batman's chaotic production somehow created a masterpiece that changed cinema forever. Jack Nicholson got rich, Tim Burton nearly lost his mind, and Michael Keaton silenced every single doubter. The film proved comic book movies could be dark, serious, and massively profitable, launching the superhero genre we know today. If you want more videos like this, please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. See you in the next one.